Charlotte, the news of the day isn't good. The era of greed and irresponsibility on Wall Street and in Washington has led us to a perilous moment. They said they wanted to let the market run free, but instead they let it run wild. And now we're facing a financial crisis as profound as any that we've seen since the Great Depression. But here's the truth. Regardless of how we got here, we're here today. And the circumstances we face require decisive action, because your job, your savings, your economic security, your house, they are now at risk. So we're going to have to work quickly in a bipartisan fashion to resolve this crisis, to avert an even broader economic catastrophe. But in Washington, there also has to be a recognition that economic recovery requires that we act not just to address the crisis on Wall Street, but also the crisis on Main Street and around kitchen tables all across America. You heard from Dolores in the story she told. After working 30 years in a place, she ended up getting laid off with almost no notice, almost no severance, losing her benefits. She's had 4 jobs since that time. She's about to lose 1. And there's stories like Dolores' all across this country. As of now, the Bush administration has only offered a concept with a staggering price tag, not a plan. Even if the U.S. Treasury recovers some or most of its investments over time, this initial outlay of up to $700 billion is sobering. And in return for their support, the American people must be assured that the deal reflects the basic principles of transparency and fairness and reform. We can't allow this to happen again. They have run this government they have run this economy into the ground. We've got to make sure that we lift it back up, but we've got to have some rules in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. First, there must be no blank check when American taxpayers are on the hook for this much money. Second, taxpayers shouldn't be spending a dime to reward CEOs on Wall Street while they're going out the door. Third, taxpayers should be protected and should be able to recoup some of this investment. Fourth, this plan has to help homeowners stay in their homes. Fifth, this is a global crisis, and the United States must insist that other nations join us in helping secure the financial markets. Sixth, we need to start putting in place the regulations, the rules of the road that I have been calling for years to prevent this from ever happening again. And finally, this plan can't just be a plan for Wall Street. It has to be a plan for Main Street. We can't just have a plan for the banks. We've got to have a plan for Dolores. We've got to have a plan for you and you. We've got to have a plan for the person who's lost their job, a plan for the person who's lost their home, a plan for the young person who's trying to afford to go to college. We have to come together as Democrats and Republicans to pass a stimulus plan that will put money in the pockets of working families, save jobs, and prevent painful budget cuts and tax hikes in our states. So, Charlotte, I know these are difficult days, but here's what else I know. I know we can steer ourselves out of this crisis. This isn't the time for fear. It's not the time for panic. It's the time for resolve, and it's the time for leadership. We can steer our way out of this crisis because that's who we are, and that's what we've always done as Americans. Our nation's faced difficult times before, and at each of those moments, we've risen to meet the challenge. because we've never forgotten that fundamental truth that here in America, our destiny is not written for us, it's written by us. We decide our fates with the help and grace of God. But here's the other thing I know. We can't steer ourselves out of this crisis by heading in the same disastrous direction. That's what this election's all about. Because while I certainly don't fault Senator McCain for all of the problems we're facing right now, I do fault the economic philosophy he's followed during his 26 years in Washington. You know, if your car's in a ditch, you don't want the driver who thinks that we should take the same path that's got us in the ditch. You want a new driver who's got a better sense of direction. And that's why I'm running for President of the United States of America. Now, you know, John McCain's philosophy is the same philosophy that George Bush has. It's the same reigning philosophy of the Republican Party. It's a philosophy that says it's okay to turn a blind eye to practices that reward financial manipulation instead of sound business decisions. It's a philosophy that says even common sense regulations are unnecessary and unwise. It's a philosophy that lets Washington lobbyists shred consumer protections and distort our economy so it works for the special interests instead of working people and for our country. We're now seeing the disastrous consequences of this philosophy all around us, on Wall Street and on Main Street. And yet Senator McCain, who candidly admitted not long ago that he doesn't know much about economics, wants to keep going down the same disastrous path. He calls himself fundamentally a deregulator. That's his quote. When reckless deregulation and lack of oversight is a big part of the problem. And here's the really scary part. Now this deregulator wants to turn his attention to health care. Yeah, he wrote in the current issue of a magazine, the current issue, that we need to open up health care to, quote, to allow more vigorous nationwide competition, as we've done over the last decade in banking. That's right, John McCain says he wants to do to the healthcare system what Washington's done to the banking system. I mean, think about what that means. Over the years, states have come up with common sense rules to make sure that insurance companies aren't just looking out for their own profits, but are also looking out for your health. We can't just toss those rules out the window. As anyone who has health care knows, the one thing we don't need is to give insurance companies an ever freer hand over what they charge, who they cover, what they'll cover. The radical idea that government has no role to play in protecting ordinary Americans has wreaked havoc on our economy. We can't let this dangerous philosophy spread to health care. What we've seen over the last few days is nothing less than the final verdict on this failed philosophy, this failed Bush-McCain philosophy. And I am running for President of the United States because the dreams of the American people must not be endangered anymore. The times are too serious. The stakes are too high. At this moment, in this election, we need real change. Change that's more than just a slogan. You notice John McCain's been trying to grab that change thing. I mean, he spent the whole election saying that he's more qualified because he's been in Washington a long time. Now suddenly, he's Mr. Change. Well, the change we're talking about isn't changing political strategies. Change we're talking about isn't changing your signs. changing your slogans. We need change that actually makes a difference in people's lives. And that's the kind of change I'll bring to Washington when I'm president.